Alright, you crazy kids. With respect to my last video on a glitch in the Matrix, a couple of you have taken me more seriously than I had intended. I accept the rational explanation for deja vu experiences, and in fact that wasn't actually the point that I was trying to make in the video. So really the point that I was making was with respect to a couple of videos ago when I was talking about perspective and points of view, and this episode with the car headlights coming towards our house jogged my memory, reminded me of all these deja vu experiences, and I was relating that as to how different groups might view them. So you might have one group that would view them as a gift, as something to be embraced, and take notes, write down all your deja vus, be aware of these experiences. Another group on the other end of the spectrum might think of them as an absolute curse, something to be rejected and rebuked at all costs. And of course, the more rational among you, many of whom are commenting on my comment section, would say, hey, there's a rational explanation for these. We understand some of the mechanisms involved, and there's no woo-woo here. And that was a point that I was actually trying to make, just to sort of confirm what I had discussed in another video. When it comes to these deja vu experiences, though, I did want to point something out. It's kind of inconsequential, but it actually relates to another topic that I want to discuss. And that is, some have suggested that maybe it was the same car just sitting there. And that, it was dark and misty, so maybe that's what I was saying. Maybe they were responding to a text or something. And I will say, these were different cars. I could see them all moving. And there's no shoulder on that road, so there's nowhere to park. But that's kind of the whole point. I was aware that it was a coincidence, right? That I happened to look out every time a car was coming. Now keep in mind, there are probably some reasons for that that I wasn't aware of at the time, but this really illustrates the point about being aware of cognitive bias. So it's getting darker, it's fall, right? So as time goes on, the darkness is encroaching closer and closer to that point in time when I'm getting ready for work in the morning. That morning had also been particularly misty and foggy, so it was dark. I'm not used to seeing headlights, for the whole summer when I'm getting ready for work. Likely what was happening was I was catching a glint of the headlights in my periphery, and that triggered me to look out. But I was really unaware of the trigger. So all I knew was every time I looked out, I'd see these headlights. And that's a really important point when it comes to cognitive bias. When people have a desire to believe in certain things, they're unaware sometimes of the triggers, and of course they're not real rigorous about investigating the causal mechanisms involved in the things that they are interpreting to be paranormal, etc., etc. And I'll link to that shortly, but one thing I did want to discuss is I sat down last night with my iPad to look at my Glitch in the Matrix video and read the comments. And in the sidebar, there's all the suggested videos based on your search or keywords attached to the video. And so they'll usually have, a similarity. There might be glitch or matrix or something like that might be a keyword that's in that other video, but the topic might be slightly different. So I'll click on a video that I notice catches my eye, and I might be watching that video and see another video that intrigues me on the sidebar of that one. And eventually, if you do enough of this Google jumping, or YouTube jumping, you can end up on a video completely removed in topic from the original topic you started with. And that got me thinking, what is this information age going to do to us as a species? It's quite mind-boggling if you think about it. This is really the next evolutionary step. Now I'll scare away all the theists, talk about evolution. But clearly it is. And, IQs have actually been increasing. If we go back to pioneer days, the average person was, their day-to-day life was kind of unchanged from one day to the next. Tend to the crops, look after the farm animals, try to keep the cougars out of the goats' pens, and maybe, the most exciting thing that might happen is if some dark stranger rides into town with an overcoat, and starts a bunch of gossip. But aside from that, and maybe the odd escape in a novel, not much going on except sort of the subsistence grind, right? But fast forward to today, and we're just bombarded with all kinds of information. Not even information that you're seeking, but even information that you're not seeking. So a couple of pokes on a keyboard and you can pull up all kinds of information on any topic you desire. Informative PDFs and reviews and tutorials and YouTube videos, etc. But also information you hadn't actually intended in the form of some, maybe advertisements or some of these videos in the sidebar, or maybe something someone posts on Facebook that you hadn't been aware of. And so it's exponential, and it makes me wonder, 50 years from now, what is humanity going to look like? What are we going to look like? Because I think we're really at the beginning of that curve. So just something fascinating that was prompted by me doing these YouTube jumps. But it can also go the other way. One of the YouTube jumps I did, I had my Glitch in the Matrix video up, and I see another Glitch in the Matrix video, and I clicked on that, and it's a YouTuber by the name of Cynthia Sue Larson, and I would call her a woo-woo specialist, and she's talking about a glimpse in the Matrix. That video is not all that good, but the next one she had was tips with quantum jumping, and I found that quite interesting. So, you know, the concept being that you can change the past by quantum jumping to a parallel universe. And she discusses in there that, you know, people might have a spouse that's cheated, or a family member or loved one that's died, or some other circumstance they want to change, and so they can do that by jumping to a parallel reality. Now, what I find interesting about this is, of course, the basis that people have for these things, right? It's not all that rigorous. It's a lot of cognitive bias involved, of course. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't parallel realities and that there isn't some part of string theory that would actually explain those things. I don't know, but the point is, neither does she. And it's evidenced by the descriptions she gives and how she talks about doing it. I think it's a lot, obviously a very lot of wishful thinking. She throws in a couple of terms in there like quantum entanglement, you know, just enough information to sort of be dangerous. So she talks about how she knows that these quantum shifts can occur. She relates a story. She lived with a woman at one point in time who had a cat. She just adored this cat, very much loved this cat. So did her husband. And one day her roommate informed her that the cat had been killed by a car. And she was very devastated, and so was her husband, because she really wished she'd had more time to spend with this cat. She felt like it had been taken too early, too young. Now, I've lost a pet. I can appreciate the sentiment involved. At some point, subsequently, she moved across the street. I don't know how much time had passed, but one day she's across the street and she sees the cat. It's kind of freaky, right? She said something about it looked like it hadn't been grooming itself very much lately, but it was definitely that cat. Immediately, I thought, Pet Cemetery. That's not the same cat. Anyway, and she's talking about how this was the same cat, but then she had to ask her husband, and her husband said, yeah, that's right, that cat did die, which I thought was weird, because she just talked about how she was so devastated and wished she'd had more time to spend with the cat. But suddenly it wasn't all that memorable that when she saw the cat, she had to remind herself that it had been hit by a car. Anyway, that was her example of how she started to know that sometimes things aren't the way they seem to be. And she even relates things like losing keys and losing purses, and opening a fridge and there's a jar missing, but then 10 minutes later the jar is there. That these are all the little clues that there's a quantum shift going on. Of course, it's interesting to me that it's always just these little things that change, right? Nothing major. Anyway, she goes on in the video to discuss what it's like to quantum jump and then how to do it. And of course, the how to do it is as vague as you can imagine, which is always the case, right, with these people. I mean, if I knew how to do it, and I was going to give an instruction to somebody, I would hope that it would be quite an exhaustive list, right? Because I'm sure quantum jumping is probably not something you want to get wrong. It should be at least more exhaustive than if I was to write down a list of steps to change the oil in your car for a home handyman, right? But never is the case. So she says what it's like when you drive a stick shift car. And I thought, oh no, you didn't. You did not just use an automotive analogy. For the record, first of all, that's my deal. I'll make the automotive analogies around here, lady. You stay away from the cars. But second of all, automotive analogies need to be reserved for the most logical and empirical experiences possible, right? I mean, if there was ever an empirical example of the fundamentals of science and principles of physics as a car, you know what I mean? Automotive analogies need to be reserved for the rational and the empirical, not the woo-woo. Please and thank you. So she says it's like when a driver takes their foot off the gas and puts in the clutch, and the clutch is an amazing thing, she says, and then shift. Shift, right? New reality. She goes on to describe how to do it. And again, extremely vague. She says you need to meditate, perhaps in nature somewhere, until you feel an acceptance. And I guess at that point, your loved one that had died suddenly reappears, or your spouse hadn't screwed around on you, or some other circumstance has changed. I find it interesting to note that it's always, you know, she ends her videos by saying she invites people to imagine how good it can get, or something to that effect. And And I think it's interesting to note that she assumes that the alternate reality, everything's going to be better, right? And so I think there's probably a causal link here, a childhood mechanism or something, the need for things to be able to be sort of made better with a wave of a magic wand. You know, her videos are all very whooshy and nice feeling, and everything's great, but you know, how is she to assume that alternate reality might not have other things? You know, if one thing could be different, what other things can be different, and how do you know that, you know, you're going to step into that reality that's only positively changed? And again, I think there's some kind of a mechanism there where people have a need to be able to change things with a wave of a magic wand for the better. Anyway, I thought I would share that. You know, it's not for me to say, obviously, that there isn't some kind of a parallel reality or multiple universes where there's you know, different potentialities. But it's not for her to say either, because she's got no evidence of it, right? And it's kind of unfortunate. She's actually got another video, how to find things with quantum shifting. And it's funny because she goes through the exhaustive list of how to do this, and it starts with the obvious, right? Like retrace your steps, and then organize your space, and then widen your search by recruiting others to help you find or ask if they had seen. And then at the end, she does what she says she taught her children to do, which is hope for a quantum shift, hope for a reality shift. And when she's talking about meditation, of course, is always a clue. She flashes up a CD with a picture of her on it that's helpful for meditation. And you can get that, of course, at her store. Now, in case you're concerned that all of this is just a money-making venture, if you go to her store, you'll notice that it says that all of the items for sale here have been blessed with a healing energy. So my question is, if this Cynthia Sue Larson were to quantum jump to another reality, would the other her in that other reality perhaps demand a little more empirical evidence for the quantum shift in the first place? Who knows? Thanks for watching.